in Yellowhead County. We are certainly thinking about them, and I understand some folks got to go home today, and hopefully the folks from Wildwood will get to go home soon. I know we have a number of evacuees here in town. I also want to thank our town staff who have been assisting Yellowhead County. We have about a dozen staff that have been working starting on Sunday, actually. In particular, I want to thank Steve Bethgy, who's been involved in the ECC at Yellowhead County, providing them some much needed support. And we'll certainly continue to support our partners in the days and weeks ahead. So hopefully we get some rain soon and the fire hazard gets reduced in our region. With that, can I get a motion, please, that we accept the agenda for the May 2nd, 2023 regular meeting of council as presented? And we will go to Councillor Moore.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. All those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that the minutes of the April 18th, 2023 regular meeting of council be adopted as presented? Councillor Pisichny.
I'll move the minutes as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Pisichny. All those in favor? Motion carried. We have no public hearings, but we do have a delegation this evening. I'd like to welcome up our member of the Legislative Assembly, Martin Long. If you want to come forward, Martin, to give a provincial update. I do want, right there. Steve will get your mic turned on for you. I do want to note that this was arranged prior to the writ drop. We would have hoped to have you here sooner, but this was the quickest we could get you on the agenda. So we'll hand things over to you.
And I see the microphone's on now, so perfect. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me a few minutes this evening. And similar to the mayor's comments to start, I want to thank the town of Edson for its coming to the table, stepping up to the plate, whatever you want to name it, but basically being there for neighbors in need. And I commend the efforts of the employees of the town for helping out constituents of mine down in Wildwood, and obviously being on standby for any other constituents in nearby regions. So thank you first and foremost for that. And I do also offer thoughts and prayers for those residents. Obviously leaving their home at this time is going to be nerve-wracking for all of them. So that said, I appreciate the opportunity to come to present, and obviously time has flown by. I have enjoyed this last 4 years and working with members of this council and administration, and thank you guys for the relationship that we developed over this past 4 years. I often get to commend the mayor in particular for being more than willing to share the sentiment of council, of community members with me and at any time of day or night. But I've appreciated the open dialogue and the advocacy for the community that has been presented by the leadership here. So thank you for that. I've enjoyed the relationship that we've developed. And tonight I just wanted to briefly touch on some of the things that we have seen, and this is a brief list. I will confess, I did take a look at the extensive list, and we have seen a lot of good things happen in the Edson community over the last few years. But in particular, and it is sad to see Councillor Schwinnard not here for the first one that was on my list, but the traffic lights by the museum coming to fruition. I know that there's been I think this is public knowledge, but the pedestrian crossing approval for down the road a little bit further. The work that's going to be, or that is being performed for the ball diamonds, seeing that come through the provincial process. Recently, the funding being announced for the library, the recycling area, the housing, immediate housing costs, and some funding for the Friendship Center over the last few years as well. And again, recently, even just in the last few weeks, I know that members of leadership and members of the community expressed a bit of disappointment in not being on the capital list for the highway through town, but we were able to see some funding for planning come out of our advocacy, and so for that, we'll be excited to see what happens after that planning process takes place. So, still have optimism for the funding opportunities and the project opportunities for the community moving forward. That said, I like to share with folks in the midst of our day-to-day lives, we obviously all have busyness. And so one thing that I have been sharing a lot of when I have the opportunity is the good things that have been happening. It's often easy to focus on the negative. So, and where I really was struck with needing to get a positive message out was last year attending a number of graduation ceremonies and hearing how many graduates, some had plans to move on to go to university, college, to trades, to medical professional, to teaching profession, Mr. Taylor, which it's all great, but how many kids said that their future plans were to marry rich? And I left after about the 6th or 7th graduation ceremony with a bit of a pit in my stomach, like, is this because they don't have plans or they don't know what is out there for opportunity? And so again, with that in mind, I did start using my podium as a place to share of the opportunity that exists in our province. It's such an opportunity that in the last year, we've seen about 50,000 people move to Alberta from other provinces. We've seen 120,000 people move here from other jurisdictions broadly. And they're moving here for the opportunity that we have in the province. We all know, I think that we're very proud in this region of our energy sector, and we've been very reliant over the years on oil and gas, and forestry, and agriculture, and mining. Now Alberta is home to a thriving tech sector. We've seen tens of thousands of jobs over the last few years created in our tech sector. Gone from what a $30-something million GDP contribution to a $730 million GDP contribution this year. In addition, we've seen major announcements in aviation. WestJet moving their hub back to Alberta was one of the most recent announcements. Manufacturing facility of de Havilland announcing their plans in just outside of Calgary. Lynx Airlines, Phil Airlines announcing major expansions. I will confess, I hope I'm not the only one in the room that hasn't watched the series The Last of Us, but I will confess that I haven't. But it is a good news story for Alberta, though. It's the largest TV production in Canadian history and obviously in Alberta history as well. And I know I'm aware of a couple of people personally in the Edson region that are film people, and I know they share the excitement for that. Again, it's one of several announcements that we've seen for film and TV, but it's a major announcement, so I'd like to share of that. Alberta, partly by sheer luck of being next door to a major port, has become a logistics hub. And this is something that we've done very quietly. A couple of major projects. Rona Lowe's announced their Western distribution hub in Alberta. They announced that a couple of years ago. Walmart has most of their Western distribution centered in Alberta as well. Now, I say a little bit of luck there. The ports of Vancouver have run out of a lot of space. So therefore, the next closest major hub being Alberta, a lot of those barges are the freighters are unloaded right onto rail cars and shipped to Alberta without cutting seals. And for anyone that's been to Calgary, I know that the mayor is a Calgary Flames fan. We won't bring that up tonight because I'm sure that it's painful for him to see the Oilers move on in the playoffs. But nevertheless, Calgary is a major logistics hub right now for Western distribution. Agri-foods, again, we have been blessed over the years with a major agriculture industry, and we've been expanding that into agri-foods recently. An announcement recently that I was very proud of was to see a major expansion with McCain, actually. I do like fries, I will confess. And so, again, it's great for, not only is it great for jobs, but hearing major brands like McCain announce those jobs here, it puts us on the map for being a home to that brand, right? Like, and that's something that I think that we should all be proud of as Albertans. Another one near and dear to my heart has been the tourism sector, and I know that we will continue to see major growth in that. We've been fortunate to have one of the most renowned tourism people in the country actually join our travel, or our Alberta tourism sector at Travel Alberta, David Goldstein, and the industry in the last couple of years, to see their excitement for change and the excitement for growth, to see that firsthand has really been a pleasure for me. And again, I know that will impact our region exponentially over the next few years. And then obviously, Alberta has very quickly become a beacon for renewable energies as well. I know that there are energy projects taking place here, and there are renewable energy projects being strongly considered for the entire region, and that's something else that I have a lot of optimism about as we move forward. So with that, again, I just did want to share a little bit of the good news story. I know that with the job announcements, with the economic rise, with us leading the country actually for economic growth, it brings challenges as well, and challenges that one of the major challenges that our region is seeing is a labor shortage. And so as we mitigate that over the coming months and years, I do expect that we will see many more people come to this region. And with that, I look forward to sharing how even a story like this week, where a community reaches out a hand to a neighbor in need, I will be sharing that from my podium as long as I am in a position to do so. That Edson has a heart for the people in its community and those around, and it would be a great place for people to call home. Thank you for allowing me to be here tonight.
All right. Well, thank you, Martin, for taking the time, and we will open the floor to questions from council. I know we have a number of different advocacy initiatives that we have been talking about in recent months. So, council, do you have any questions for Mr. Long? Go ahead, Councillor Byer.
Thanks, through the chair, to Mr. Long. Thanks for your presentation and bringing forward some of the things that you have been able to accomplish over the past several years. I do have two questions. The first one is, so you've talked about a lot of the really good things that you guys have done, and I certainly won't argue that. Some of the challenges from a municipal perspective is the provincial downloading. So you guys have been able to make some really gains, in certain areas, and we've talked about this maybe weekly at our meetings. It's come up, and that's about $1 million worth annually. So $500,000 in capital and $500,000 operational, which, if we did the math, would be about 9% tax increase that we've had to not do because we can't just do that, and that happened a couple years ago. So we've been trying to manage that. And going forward, I believe starting in 2024, we're expected to see $500,000 less on the capital portion, where the new framework from MSI, which is how municipalities receive their monies from the province to fix things like roads and bridges and sewers and some of those larger dollar items into the new LGFF framework. And during that time, we've also seen some municipalities in our region have double-digit tax increases. So I'm just wondering if Martin Long would be able to just kind of share your perspective on that perspective.
So, firstly, I'm assuming by you guys you mean Alberta government. Okay, so thank you for that. Just needed clarification. Well, I will say that in 2019, when government was formed with under the banner that I came through, we were in a pretty dark place, quite frankly. And year over year, government spending was actually increasing by 7% from about 5 or 6 years consecutively, where provincial revenues were declining and the economy was stagnant or declining. So with that, there were hard decisions to be made. Quite frankly, some were very unpopular. Unfortunately, I do believe that many of those decisions were necessary to bring spending under control until we could actually see revenue growth. For context, we went from a debt of $14 billion in 2014, and so this is going from a few different governments to $85 billion in debt by 2019. So with that, we could either keep up the trajectory, which would see us, $120 to $150 billion in debt, or we could slow the growth. And actually our goal was to flatline spending, which we did within 2 years. It couldn't even be done in 1 year. But inevitably, we knew that we needed to grow the economy. So some of the things that I discussed tonight was the growing the economy portion. Obviously, the revisiting of how we funded municipalities was part of that. There were a number of other initiatives that were part of that. And I know that one of the largest pieces of advocacy that I heard from municipalities was if Alberta municipalities, both rural and urban, are going to, if I may, suffer when the province suffers, then we should also benefit when the province benefits. And my understanding from the recent announcements around LGFF is that is part of the framework moving forward, that we will, a rising tide will float all boats. So when the province is doing well, then municipalities will benefit with the province. So from that standpoint, I will continue, should I stay in the role, to advocate on behalf of my municipalities and obviously the ratepayers that are there's the same taxpayer provincially as there are regionally, and look for those ratepayers, those taxpayers to benefit when the province does benefit, i.e. from resource revenue and a strong economy.
Thank you, Mr. Long. We will move on to Councillor Moore.
Through the mayor to Mr. Long. Yes, once again, thanks for the presentation. Very interesting stats. Many pundits out there think that Calgary will be very election-centric as far as different presentations and such. And do you think that will cause a backlash in say, Edmonton and some rural municipalities? Thank you.
Inevitably, all voters decide elections, and I have heard people discuss Calgary as the battleground. Quite frankly, my opinion is every municipality, every region is a battleground, and I think that the more that we collectively approach elections, elections like that, I think it's a more realistic way to approach elections, I should say. Will people, I can't remember your exact term, but will people feel jaded by, or, basically by one region getting a little more attention? I think that's always a risk. That said, again, my commitment is, regardless of election promises, election outcomes, is that if, again, should I remain in the role, that I will continue to be an advocate for our region to make sure that we are given good standing.
All right, thank you. Council, do you have any other questions for Mr. Long while we have him here this evening? Go ahead, Councillor Byer.
Thanks, through the chair to Mr. Long. You mentioned in your presentation that we have a job shortage well, I mean, we know we do in the region and perhaps the rest of the province as well, and many, people moving into the province, which, is good news. One of the trade-offs of that that we've experienced in Edson by having some larger projects is what happens to the vulnerable population. And it appears that when there are more stable people coming into the community, the vulnerable populations get kicked out of their apartments, or the rents rise so much that they can't afford it. And, we hear that from the residents, that when we have homeless people, they come barking on our doors quite loudly. And we remind them that it's a provincial responsibility. And we've been advocating for help for our vulnerable population and the homeless situation. And it's even actually on the agenda later tonight to further advocate through Alberta Municipalities Convention to advocate for the province to do their responsibility. Do you have anything to comment on that?
Go ahead, Mr. Long.
Thank you. Yeah, actually, that's something that I appreciate, and one of the things that I've appreciated from the leadership in this community already is sharing ideas for projects for the community, and presenting those actually to different ministers actually that have come through town, and being open about that, so we can try to come up with the financial backing for community-based solutions. I've been involved with nonprofits previously myself, and I will say that I believe that the best solutions actually come from members of the region, as opposed to a solution coming from, whether it be Edmonton or Ottawa or otherwise. The locals know what fits their community better than outsiders, if you will. And so I will look forward to what council and members of this community do bring forward for ideas, and how I can be an advocate to seek continued provincial government support.
Thank you. Anybody else have any further questions? Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, through the mayor to Mr. Long, thank you so much for your presentation. I just have a few comments, and then I'll get to sort of a question at the end. And just with regards to your comment about grads, and many people say marry rich or whatever, but I found over 20 years of teaching that kids at 17 or 18 years old, when asked what they want to do when they grow up, they'll say teacher, nurse, engineer, although they don't know what an engineer does, and maybe something else, but they don't have an inkling of even a fraction of the jobs that are out there. Even people sitting at this table right now, if you went back to when you were 17 or 18, is this what you thought you would be doing with your life, with your career? So I just take that question when you ask that at grads, they just don't know. So that's that comment. I do want to thank you in terms of, and I've met people and know people within the film industry through my role as a drama teacher, that they're working. And they're seeing the exciting things that are happening with the film industry. I know of individuals filming Hallmark movies in like 12 days outside of Edmonton. So it's an exciting thing to have, and it's a great draw for our province to do that. Further to Councillor Byer's comments with regards to downloading, I have certainly an issue when the province tries to divert that. So I'll call it the blame. Just divert the cost to the municipalities. The province looks like the heroes, and the municipalities then look like the villains, right? And that's been happening. We're going to be discussing something later tonight about plowing sidewalks on our on Second and Fourth Ave. Something we wouldn't generally have to do if we had sort of a better sort of I would say not working relationship, but if the job was done correctly, we wouldn't maybe have to do that. Now we're gonna have to spend money to do that. That's just another cost we're going to see. And it's frustrating that the municipalities get saddled with it, and the province comes back and says, well, look at us, we're decreasing deficit, we're getting our spending under control. They're just dumping it to the municipalities. And I certainly have a problem with that, and I take that to you to take to your caucus to say this has to stop, right? Finally, getting on to my sort of question as another topic is provincial police force. And this council has been unanimous in being against the creation of a provincial police force. You see buttons on the mayor and Councillor Byer. We support the RCMP. The RCMP has done a fantastic job. We believe there's issues within our crime system of not enough Crown prosecutors, lacks bail hearings, things like that. Those are the issues. Changing the decals on the car isn't going to fix the problem, and we've been very clear on this. So when the time comes, will you speak, within caucus, within government, to say that a provincial police force, on a scale of bad ideas, is one of the worst ideas, and to say that it's not going to solve the problems that we have. So that's my question.
Go ahead, Mr. Long.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. I think I've been very open, actually, for a number of years about any conversation around policing, and I do make this clear with not only government colleagues but with people in policing around the region and around the province. Similar sentiment. In fact, I think that largely our province has missed an opportunity for a couple of years about placing more onus on the federal bail reform necessity and how much it's impacting the safety in our communities. And again, I've been very open about my thoughts on that, and I have been I've been pleased to see in recent months our province and other provinces have all come together and been very outspoken about the need for bail reform. And again, I've had open dialogues with several police officers who've shared circumstance not only in this community but around the region of what they're seeing. If the public knew, the warrants out for someone's arrest, that they do pick up on those outstanding warrants and then they're consequently released within hours, and that puts such a strain on policing resources when often it might be 8 or 9, it might be 10 or 12, but there are prolific repeat offenders in all of our communities that are basically using up the majority of our policing resources. So yeah, I have been very open in that dialogue already, and I will continue to be open in that dialogue. And I've also been very open in my appreciation for all of our police officers, whether they are RCMP or city police officers around the province. I think that we've attracted some of the best talent in policing to our province because of the opportunity we have here. And on the other part of that, the provincial aspect that we do control is the court. So whether it's Crown prosecutors or court workers or what have you, that is something that we do control, and we have allocated more funding to that to try to get more resources available. again, that won't correct it overnight. Like, we still need people who will go into those roles, and that's something, my comment earlier, like, about graduations, part of that is, like, how do we partner together to let people, young teens in Edson, Alberta, or Hinton, or Whitecourt know that they could become a Crown prosecutor, they could become a lawyer, or a court reporter, or, I know a girl in Whitecourt that does is it stenography or whatever? Yeah. And so, those opportunities are out there. But anyway, I will continue that advocacy that we need to continue to push on the federal system from one hand, and then do our job on the other, as far as getting the court resources in place. And then there are obviously a few communities who still want to undertake at least a look at what it would be like to have a municipal police service, and that's their choice. I believe that the province can uphold its end of the bargain, which is, again, advocacy to the feds and making sure the court resources are in place. But thank you, Mr. Taylor.
All right, thank you. Council, any other questions for Mr. Long before we allow him to get back at it? If not, just want to thank you as well for the good working relationship. I know when you were first elected, we sat down, I gave you a list of 3 things, and you delivered on all 3. One of those, of course, is funding for our multi-use facility. There is a provincial component to that under the federal grants, so I do appreciate that. And you started working on my second list. So one of the big concerns from us as a municipality, though, is our wastewater treatment plant that was built just a few years ago. It was commissioned, I think it started operating in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. And shortly after that, we were advised that we need millions of dollars of upgrades. And here we are. I know that I think our utilities department is still working with Alberta Environment. The minister has chosen not to meet with us on this, but it's a big price tag. And as we talk about downloading aging infrastructure, we are a very old community, over 100 years old. These types of costs are unacceptable, especially with a new facility like that. So I guess, do you have an update? I know you were working on this file on where we would be with a wastewater treatment plant, because what was the original price tag on that? Do you recall? Yeah, 16, 17, 18 million dollars. And now we're looking at another $5 million worth of upgrades just a few years later. So any comments on that?
I don't have an update on that at this point. I thank you for the acknowledgement on your lists. Oh my goodness, the lists. But this is something where I will take it back to the announcement that we did receive. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, about funding for planning. That's where I think that is so important. So on a project like wastewater treatment, a year after the project's complete, or when it's still actually being completed, we're not being hit with change orders and, oh, did you hear the new standards and that sort of thing, to bring us to this point where now we're going, okay, this is going to be a major cost again. For me, this is, and so that's going to be my message again. Should I pick up the role 27, 20, whatever, how many days it is from now, to the province, is if we're going to do changes to municipalities midway through the project being completed, then the province does have an obligation, in my opinion. So that will be my advocacy, Mr. Mayor. And again, I don't have an update on that at this point.
All right, thank you. With that, anybody else? Well, thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. You're free to stay if you like for the rest of the meeting, or we certainly understand if you want to go along your way.
I thank you for that invitation. I will sneak out of the room this evening. Another night, I hope to come back for the duration of the council meeting, and take many notes. But thank you so much for this opportunity. And as I said at the start, I have thoroughly enjoyed being in this role and working with you guys for this past few years. So thank you for walking this journey with me.
All right. Thank you very much, Martin. Have a good night. All right. We will move on to reading of bylaws. Can I get a motion, please, that council give first reading to bylaw number 2293? Councillor Beyer, go ahead.
I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Beyer. And we have our General Manager of Corporate Services, Sarah Bittner, with us this evening to walk us through first reading.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. So tonight we're presenting the 2023 mill rate bylaw. It sets the mill rates for the 2023 taxation year. The ones that you see that's being presented tonight, this reflects the budget that was passed at the April 18th meeting. So that budget that was passed transfers over and we create the mill rates that we need to, that are required to create the taxes that are required within that budget. So property tax, just a bit of a background. Property tax is quite heavily regulated in the MGA, in Part 10 of the MGA. It tells us things like what must be shown on a tax notice. So you get those tax notices with a lot of things on them, very busy, all things written on the back. All those things are requirements that need to be on a tax notice. It tells us that we must set bylaws for the taxation rates, as we're doing tonight, hopefully. Different levies that can be applied. Tells us that we can have different levies on a tax notice, such as a local improvement tax, which is a tax where a certain area in town we may have done some improvement on. An example I can use is, say, 63rd Street. A few years ago that was a gravel road. We came and decided we wanted to pave that. But you must go out to the people that are going to be affected by that road. They are going to benefit from it. But they also have a say in whether they want to actually pay money towards that road. So there is a bylaw that goes out, etc. So that's all covered within the MGA as well. It tells us which properties are exempt from taxes, such as churches and schools, and also outlines any tax recovery procedures for any taxes that may not be paid within the stipulated times. So there's a lot more in there, but that's just a few of the things that the MGA gives us guidance on. So, sorry. So we collect 4 different taxes on the yearly tax notices. So there's the municipal tax, which is the taxation rate that is set by Town Council, that we get enough money to cover our budget. We also get seniors requisitions. The Evergreens Foundation sends us the amounts that they require from us. And this year it's 4.24% of our proposed taxes that we are collecting. And then there's some provincial requisitions. The education property tax is actually 21.31% of the taxes that we collect from our property owners. There's also another small one that's just come in the last couple of years, a designated industrial properties requisition, is 0.04% of what we're collecting. It's around $6,600. But the only taxation amount that Town Council has control over is that first one, that municipal tax. The rest are ones that are sent to us, we must collect them, and they are also incorporated in that mill rate, which you'll see as we go through. So there's 2 amounts that we look at for town assessment. So we do have a total assessment, but this includes all our exempt properties. And there was an increase of 4.04% from the 2022 tax year. And that's the other thing. We have to, it's sometimes going to be a little confusing when you see 2022 assessment, 2023 tax year. It's just the assessment year is the year before, ours is the tax year that we're putting them out in, so there can be a little confusion there. But of course the one that we look at for our budgeting purposes is a taxable assessment. So this is used to calculate the mill rates. And there was a small increase of 2.12% over last year's taxable assessment. Also, we a couple of years ago brought in a non-residential tax exemption program. It was first put in use for the 2022 taxation year. So this is the second year that has now been in use. There were no new applications for the incentive in 2023 that met requirements. Therefore, the assessment impacted for 2023 is the same as for 2022. And it equates to around 48,600 of municipal taxes that we won't be collecting based on the tax exemption program for this year. The program does only apply to municipal taxes. These properties still have to pay their provincial and seniors, etc. Any tax for any part of their properties that existed before the development or the enhancement, and any increases in assessments since that was granted as well. They get a 5-year exemption, and the first 2 years are at 100%, and then it goes 75, 50, 25. So they do get, we do get some of that back in that 3rd year. So moving on to the mill rates. The taxation as was approved in the budget, along with the requisition amounts that we just spoke about, have led to both the combined mill rates increasing for 2023 from 2022. Now, by combined, I mean it's all the mill rates we have for the municipal, the evergreens, the school, etc. So looking at the on the left there, the residential, you can see that the municipal and the evergreens went up. The schools went down slightly, and that's because the province actually put a hold on sort of a freeze on the amounts they're collecting. So the 2022 rates and the 2023 rates are very, very similar. So with that slight increase in assessment that we have has brought that mill rate down just a little bit for the schools. So the combined one is up about 4.08% from 2022. And on the non-res side, very similar. As you can see, the municipal and evergreens has gone up, the school has gone down, and but their overall combined has gone up 2.19% mill rate from 2022. Just another, we can do a quick look at some of those differences that makes between 2022 and 2023 taxation. So these charts you see, we have a residential and a non-residential. So I've split them into, you can see the difference that the municipal is made, the school is made, and the evergreens is made. But of course on the right is the total, and this is what people will see on their tax notices. We've just picked assessment amounts, but the green line within the residential is the average assessment of a residential property in Edson for the 2022 assessment year. You'll see there isn't one in the non-res because it's much more difficult to come up with an average non-residential property. Residential property all has the same usage, sorry, whereas non-residential it varies widely based on even the size of properties, the uses of properties, etc. So that's why there's no average you see within that non-residential. I believe that's the end of my presentation, so I will open up for questions.
Thank you very much, GM Bittner, for that presentation. Council, do you have any questions? All right, seeing none, I will call the question then. All those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that council give second reading to bylaw number 2293? Councillor Bevan?
I'll make it so.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion that bylaw number 2293 be placed for third reading? Councillor Taylor?
I so move.
All those in favor? Motion carried. And can I get a motion, please, that council give third reading to bylaw number 2293? Go ahead, Councillor Posichny.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Councillor Posichny. All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you, GM Bittner. Can I get a motion, please, that council give first reading to bylaw number 2289? Go ahead, Councillor Byer.
I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Byer. And we have Mr. Guy Latour, our Parks and Facilities Maintenance Manager, who will present to us on our Community Standards Amending Bylaw number 2289. We'll just give him a few moments here to get set up on the computer.
Testing. All right. Through the chair to council, I have a short presentation that will talk to both items that I have on the agenda. At any time, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Most of this will be a review of stuff we've already talked about. So, there we go. So,
Sorry to interrupt. Let's get you to share your screen here.
oh,
Sorry.
thank you. We encourage discussion and questions throughout the presentation. The presentation will talk about the sidewalk facility and trail snow and ice policy CS9, the service timelines, updated maps, and financial implication. And then we'll also talk about how that will affect the community standards amendments that we want to bring for bylaw number 2289. So this will, we're asking council to give first, second, and third reading to bylaw number 2289, and that council approve the sidewalks, facilities, trail, snow, and ice control policies CS9. Boy, that's getting long, eh? The policy, the snow ice clearing policy, establishes the snow control commences after a snow event wherein snowfall accumulation exceeds 3 centimeters, and lays out the priority order and completion timelines for the following areas. We've set 4 priorities and a timeline for each one of those priorities for once the snowfall has completed. So facility sidewalks at all our facilities 24 hours after the snow falls. Town maintains sidewalks 48 hours. Highway adjacent sidewalks 72 hours. And town trails 96 hours. The primary service level change envisioned in this policy is the addition of the highway adjacent sidewalks priority 3 to the parks portfolio with a clearance timeline of 72 hours. This acknowledges the unique maintenance challenges for adjacent landowners. The highway, as you know, is under provincial jurisdiction, and the prevailing snow clearing practices often lead to snow being deposited on adjacent sidewalks, as well as the importance of these sidewalks to the town's pedestrian network and commercial activity. Moreover, adding this service will promote standardization, as current practices are inconsistent with the town clearing some sidewalks but not the others. So we did update the maps as requested, so they were clearer and there was more definition to them. So we've split them into 6 routes or 6 areas. So this is the southwest routes. That includes the one-ways. So everything on the maps, priority 1 is a facility, our nice big neon green, and then trails are red, sidewalks are red, priority 2, priority 3, highways are yellow, and then the trails are purple, priority 4.
If I could just pause right there,
Yep.
Mr. Latour. And I'm sorry, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here
You bet.
because this just kind of flagged with me here. We have the sidewalk to the north, just across from Griffiths Park. And I see on the map there it goes from 55th Street all the way over to, I guess it would be 53rd. Part of that land there, that section where the mouse pointer is in, that's GYPSD land. So why are we clearing sidewalks for the school division?
That has been a route that has been cleared from there to keep that whole area open. It's just something we have been doing in the past.
Okay, so that's historical that we've been doing.
Yeah, yeah.
Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, through the mayor, do we clear in front of other schools as well?
No, we do not.
I think this will be a conversation we'll have to have with our school division colleagues.
And the west routes, most of them are sidewalks and facilities. Key to this area is our dead ends that we've talked about in the past in previous We have left them in as part that we will be clearing. They will tend to need to be cleared by hand, though, for the most part. Putting equipment on them is not really ideal, so we'll be cleaning them by hand. Northwest routes, which includes a large portion of the trails. And then the central, you can see all the downtown sections as they would, all of them, including the new ones and the old ones that would be included in the policy. Northeast routes, and then the last little bit to the southwest or southeast routes. So, any questions on the routes themselves or the priorities?
Council? No, I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay. So, financial implication of this new policy, and part of that policy taking on the additional 16 routes or 16 blocks in the priority 3 or in the highways. The administration is recommending that we contract that out, the whole one-way section. And to do that, we estimate the annual cost for the entire length, the old part we've been doing and the new part, the new 16 parts or 16 blocks, would be between $30,000 and $40,000 a year, all dependent on how many snowfalls we have and what kind of contracted rates we can get. We've made some estimations. So just to reiterate, all these blue routes are the 16 new blocks that we would be taking on with the additional highway clearing. There would be some cost savings because we would no longer have our operator doing those one-ways. So we anticipate then that freeing up some time for that operator to help with other snow routes and ice flooding and other priorities that we may have. So we are recommending reducing the seasonal temporary laborer that we asked for to do the additional flooding and for the skating loop, that we would reduce that back to our original budgeted on-call casual part-time laborer to come help during the initial flooding of the rinks. So reverting back, there would be a savings of $18,000. So at a upper cost of $40,000 with the savings of $18,000, we're looking at an additional $21,919 roughly to take on the additional 16 blocks if we contract it out, if that's the way we go with that. Any questions on financial? Okay. With this comes an amendment to the Community Standards Bylaw. As under the Community Standards Bylaw, adjacent landowners are required to clear sidewalks within 48 hours of a snow event. However, Council has indicated that given the specific maintenance challenges associated with the sidewalks along Highway 16, it is willing to have the town assume responsibility for clearing the snow and ice from these sidewalks. The proposed bylaw would therefore amend the Community Standards Bylaw by creating an exception from snow and ice clearing obligations for highway adjacent sidewalks and allow council to designate certain sidewalks for these purposes. That is all I have to present. I'm open to questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Latour, for your work on this and for your presentation. Council, do we have any questions, comments, concerns? Go ahead, Councillor Pasichny.
Yeah, through the chair to Mr. Latour. Sorry, I'm just looking at the map. So when we, I guess maybe the question maybe for the mayor, but if we vote on this, is this map like the standard, or should we point out the errors now?
I think it'd be a good idea for you to point out.
Yeah.
So if you may go to your map, then on 16th Avenue, you have a red tick to the left. You're no previous there, upper left towards the yellow box. Yeah, that's a private lot. so I'm not sure why we're clearing it. If you do, it looks like it's town land, but it's a vacant lot that's for sale currently. It's also my mother's, so I'd prefer you take it off. Then down, no, don't tell her I said that though. Down on 12th Avenue and 51st, same slide. You have a private property highlighted with the water pump station is a little bit to the north of that. So not,
Pump station.
the water pumps, that is not on the corner. It is across from the church.
This one right here or this one down here? This one down
That one
here?
there.
Yeah.
Just slide up a bit. There's a little rectangular.
Oh,
one there.
this should
That
be
is
there.
the actual
Okay.
pump house.
Okay.
And then you missed one over in Hillendale. On the you come out of the pond area, but there is a town trail that connects the Purple Line to 15th Avenue. That should be part of our clearing.
Okay.
So just process-wise, CO Beverage, if we pass this, do we need to pass it with the amendments?
I'm just looking, Mr. Meredith.
Okay.
I only brought it up because they're just errors.
Will I get you to turn off your mic? I know. Sure. We're just going to take a 3 to 5 minute recess, just so we can figure out procedurally how we want to move forward. All right, we will resume the meeting, and I'll hand things over to CO Beverage. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilor Precision, for recognizing the errors that were made on the map. One of the things I wanted to confirm that wasn't actually within the bylaw. So we're on the bylaw first reading at this point. I just needed to make sure where we were at. So what we'll ask is that when we do get to the policy item, that we have council adopt the policy CS-9 with the following corrections, and we'll just list out the corrections, and we will make sure that these maps are correct, and we will. So it's moving forward. So thank you very much for providing that to us and allowing us the recess to address it.
All right, thank you, CO Beverage. Any other further questions, comments, or concerns? All right. Well, with that, thank you for your presentation, Mr. Latour. So just a reminder to council, we are on the community standards amending bylaw. We're not on the policy itself yet. So I will call the question. All those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that council give second reading to bylaw number 2289? Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. And can I get a motion that bylaw number 2289 be placed for third reading? Councillor Byer.
I so move.
Thank you. All those in favor? Motion carried. And can I get a motion, please, that council give third reading to bylaw number 2289? Councillor Pasichny.
I move third reading.
Thank you, Councillor Pasichny. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. And now we'll go to reports from administration. Can I get a motion, please? So you want the amendments listed in the motion? Okay. Can I get a motion, please, that council approve the sidewalk, facility, and trail snow and ice control policy CS9 with the amendments of? Councillor Pasichny, do you want to go through your list once again?
Sure. On Northeast Zone map, there would be the addition of the two access points from 15th Avenue, being the far over by 40th Street. There's a little bit of an L shape there. And then the connector from 15th Avenue to the trail. Then that is on Northeast Zone map. On the Northwest Zone map, the red marks on the corner of 12th and Edson Drive are highlighted. when in fact they should be further up on Edson Drive by the water pump pressure zone. Yeah, about not a block, but up across the way from the alleyway. And then on 16th Avenue, there is a privately owned vacant lot that is highlighted. Unless it's designed to highlight the town portion of the area, but the trail goes right through there. So the town properties is a trail, so that the 16th Avenue on Wilshire should be removed. And I think that was it, wasn't it? Did I miss one?
Daniel's just getting caught up there. This is the great thing about live stream. He can go back and verify. Go ahead, Daniel.
If I may, Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Pasicny, I just missed the third correction there, which map that applied to.
The same, that is the northwest zone map. And it's the 16th Avenue mark there. It's a vacant lot, privately owned vacant lot.
And you're making that motion, right, Councillor Pasicny?
If you allow me to move it, I'll move it.
All right, so Councillor Pasicny moved that. And now we will open the floor to any further questions, comments, or concerns. Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
Through the mayor to council, well, first off to administration, and just say thank you for finding the cost savings, the 30 to 40,000 down to about the 21,000. You finding some cost savings, that's great, and I appreciate that. Still, this goes back to our early presentation with MLA Long about things that cost us more, and this wouldn't cost us more if the province had taken the care and attention that it needs to when they hire a third party to do this, right? And we're having to spend, again, more money on this. So I don't know the process, whether it is that we send a letter, and I don't care whether they pay half, I don't care whether they pay a quarter, but there's got to be some compensation, because it's just another amount that we get saddled with, and it all adds up. And I don't care whether it's 21,000, I don't care if it's 2 million, it just adds up. And it's a frustrating thing that we continually have to do this. So I don't know the process of that, how we direct administration to do that, but I think that's just appropriate. So.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor, for your comments. Well, the process would be for you to make a motion following our discussion on this. If you want us to send a letter to Alberta Transportation, I would take issue. I don't think it's a third-party contractor that's the issue here. I think it's just the setup of the highway corridor with the sidewalks just adjacent to the highway. I do know that they have slowed down the plows through town, but that still has not necessarily helped in certain situations just because the proximity of those sidewalks to the highway. CO Beveridge, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I would want to note also to council that GM Kitlitz also has had recent meetings with Alberta Transportation on this. So I'd like to provide him the opportunity just to speak a little bit with regards to our discussions regarding the maintenance of the highway corridor. He can do.
Go ahead, GM Kitlitz.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah. So just specifically, we're establishing a relationship with AT, or sorry, not AT anymore. It's Alberta Economic Corridors, I think, is what it is. To talk about maintenance of the highway, both summer and winter. So one of the things we did mention in our meeting was a review of how the highway is maintained because of this sidewalk issue. I explained to them that there's instances where, in current state, not necessarily with this policy in place, but where business owners would clean their sidewalks and half an hour later they were full of ice and snow again, right? So anyway, so the discussions are happening. We don't have solutions yet or options, but I think the good news is we're having the discussions and we're communicating actually weekly. We have an weekly email exchange on Mondays to talk about what they're doing on the highway in terms of maintenance and what we're doing adjacent to the highway in terms of maintenance, so we can coordinate efforts and just be aware of what each other are doing. So there's movement. We got a ways to go, but we're starting to build the relationships, I guess.
Thanks for that information, GM Kitlitz. And go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
So through the mayor to council, so long as those discussions are happening, and then we're talking about this cost here, and those enter into those discussions, I won't be making a motion then for any letter or direction, but just saying that this is costing us more. And as long as those discussions are happening, and certainly if we're seeing in the future still issues arising, then we're going to need to sort of financial compensation back from the province for this, because this is, again, it's just another thing that we have to pay for. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I know that for those that are not aware of this discussion, because we've had a few meetings on this, this is a big concern for many business owners along the highway, where they have spent a lot of money, time, effort clearing their sidewalks, and like was mentioned just minutes later, a snowplow comes and plows it all in, and it's really an impossible situation. And we have had an inconsistent policy on this. So I'm glad we're making movement. I know there is a cost associated with that. Some of our largest taxpayers are located on that highway corridor, and I think that if we want a walkable community and we want people to be safe, we need to, have an enhanced level of service. And the question is, as you said, Councillor Taylor, is who's going to pay for that? It is their highway. It's their snow off the highway that causes this issue, and then we're left with the complaints in the aftermath, and sometimes flooding issues and other concerns. So I'm really happy to hear that there's ongoing discussions with our folks and economic corridors on that. Council, do you have any further questions, comments, or concerns? I know we've batted this around probably 5 or 6 times now. So with that, I will call the question. All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Latour. Can I get a motion, please? The council second the motion regarding protections for vulnerable residential tenants to be moved by the municipality of Jasper at the 2023 Alberta Municipalities Convention and Trade Show. And Councillor Byer, would you like to make that motion?
I would like to move it, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Byer. And we have Mr. Lucas, our legislative officer, who's presenting on this evening.
Thank you and good evening, Mayor and Council. So as noted, I'll be presenting on some requests we've received to second motions being brought forward at the Alberta Municipalities 2023 Conference and Trade Show. So a bit of background, Council will be largely familiar with this process, but every year at the Alberta Municipalities Convention, there is a resolution process which allows the member municipalities to identify and prioritize issues of common concern as well as associated solutions, which then go on to inform the advocacy efforts of the association for the next few years. The deadline this year to submit a resolution is May 31st, and resolutions, when submitted to Alberta municipalities, must include evidence of a seconding municipality. And that is why we're bringing this forward at this time, so that Council can review the requests, and if they are in principle open to supporting them, but would like some alterations, then we can bring it back again at the May 16th meeting and still make that deadline. So the 2 requests we've had are from the municipality of Jasper and the town of Rocky Mountain House. These are substantively related motions, but dealing with different aspects of some interrelated problems. So the one from municipality of Jasper relates to protections for vulnerable residential tenants, dealing largely with issues of affordability and housing. Its specific prescriptions are advocating for amendments to existing legislation or the passage of new legislation to increase protections for these populations, increase financial supports for those for whom housing comprises a very significant share of their yearly income, as well as improve the availability, so the supply of affordable housing. The motion from the town of Rocky Mountain House addresses the more specific problem of homelessness and the associated needs in rural communities. But in the motion, they're really talking about rural communities and small towns. So they're calling for investment in rural municipalities to aid in the development of affordable units and additional supports for vulnerable populations, helping us to leverage or maximally leverage federal funding to increase preventative resources vis-a-vis homelessness, as well as the dedication of more resources for permanent shelter spaces, emergency shelters, and transitional housing, and investment in health and support services that are necessary often to ensure that folks can get housed and stay housed thereafter. Obviously, substance of this is largely a political question. However, administration notes no significant or major technical or drafting errors, again noting that these are presented by the municipalities making the requests. The most relevant background information for Edson specifically would come from our Housing and Service Needs Estimation Report, which noted relevantly that 308 people are identified as currently living in unstable housing situations in Edson. Nearly 70% of participants in the survey believe that Edson does not provide enough accessible and affordable housing. And finally, the report gave a recommendation to expand low-income rental and purchasing options. So with that, we have the two motions. Obviously, right now we have on the floor the motion to second the resolution from the municipality of Jasper. And with that, I would happily take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Council, any questions, comments, or concerns on this? Go ahead, Councillor Pisichny.
Yeah, through the mayor to council. Since we're on the first motion, it's really a vague motion. I know from the industry I work in, they've just put a significant increase in funds into the rent supplement program. So that's already been addressed to the point where it's been significant and it's helping greatly right now. The challenge I have is in their wording from Jasper about more legislation on for renters. And the challenge, there's a fine line. If and I believe the reason behind their merit is they had one of their main big apartment building decided to up their rent significantly, which caused an uproar in their community. And the merit behind their motion here and their resolution is they are looking for rent controls. And to me, more regulation there's a lot of regulations on landlords now, making the system even, it makes it more challenging for people wanting to invest in rental properties if there's more and more regulations. So I'm not against affordable housing. I just find that this resolution they're putting forward it doesn't say what kind of legislation they want. It doesn't say, it's very vague. Pass new legislation to increase protection for vulnerable residential tenants. What does that mean? What kind of legislation are they looking for? I'd like to know that. It's very vague. It's throw some money at it kind of thing. And Jasper's rents, based on the rental surveys, is very similar to that of Hinton. The only difference is they have zero availability, where Hinton has availability in rentals. So I'm just challenged by their resolution. I'm not against supporting affordable housing. I just find this a very open-ended, and there's not really any real merit of what they're looking for in this resolution. So I have a tough time supporting it. So.
All right, thank you, Councillor Pisichny, for your comments. Council, any further questions, comments, or concerns? Quiet group tonight. All right, with that, I will call the question then. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please? The council second the motion regarding homelessness and associated social needs in rural communities to be moved by the town of Rocky Mountain House at the 2023 Alberta Municipalities Convention and Trade Show. Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
Through the mayor to council, I'm supportive of this resolution. With things that we've seen, whether it be inflationary costs, we visited the food bank not so long ago. They've seen a 19% increase from 2021 to 2022. We see issues of homelessness in our wooded areas with cost of fires, and obviously with fire calls, and that's a response that we intake, or another cost that we intake. So more needs to be done. The challenge I have is when the province announces funding, is that who gets that funding? Where does that funding go? And is it going to the right place so it's getting to the right need in our community? We had funding announced not so long ago, and I believe it was Reflections that took on that funding. And whether or not that is the right direction of where that funding is going is challenging. And is it getting to where it needs to go? And I know with Mayor Zahara and Councillor Byer, I sit with the homelessness task force, and I think we really need to start thinking about, what we're going to do when that next funding announcement comes. Are we going to have something in place where we can take that funding and get it to where it needs to go, and not to something maybe, just willy-nilly or it creates a Band-Aid solution? We're starting to create long-term solutions to this. So, and I bring that up, to talk about future with the homelessness task force and those types of things. So, supportive of the motion, and I just want this council to start thinking about what we want to do on our end. Yes, the province will announce funding. That's great. But where is it going? And is it going to where it needs to go to solve the problems within our community? Because if it's not, then all of our advocacy is basically for nothing. Right? So those are my comments.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
To the mayor, to Mr. Lucas, do we have any idea what the homelessness numbers in Rocky Mountain House are at this point?
Go ahead, Mr. Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to Councillor Moore. Unfortunately, I haven't gathered that information. I would defer maybe to my colleagues if we do, but it wasn't included in the motion. So.
Thank you. Rocky has attended, I believe, our regional homelessness municipal coalition meetings. I don't know. I think they're just doing a study, but I'm not 100% on that. I think what's relevant here is our numbers, which are quite concerning in terms of the people that may be close to experiencing homelessness in our community. And I think to Councillor Taylor's point, I'm going to continue on here, Councillor Moore, is that we did have recent funding announcements for affordable housing projects and different things, and we had 2 weeks to apply. It just comes out of nowhere, and it's like, well, and that was like right before Christmas. And so those are some of the challenges we have with these things, that they come out of nowhere with these funding announcements, and you're not necessarily, we weren't prepared to get on with it. So I think our staff have been working on some ideas and things of that nature, but it takes some time and it takes some effort. But I think we do need to highlight this issue. This is a major issue in our community. It ties in with our strategic plan. Both motions do, and so I will be supporting it. Council, any other questions? Go ahead, Councillor Byer.
Right, through the chair to council and administration, just further to Councillor Taylor and Mayor Zahara's comments about the funding and how do we get it, and what our MLA Long said earlier was that province wants to fund it, but we have to come up with a solution. And when I say we, it's a community, because the town doesn't have staff dedicated to the homeless population. We are obligated in many other areas, and that's a provincial one. And we don't have a provincial person in Edson for our homeless population. It's volunteers. That's it. We have volunteer organizations that come together, and when we have our meetings with the homelessness and mental health task force, there are members of the community that are employed through their workplace that are coming and trying to bring certain things forward, but it's not one person's role. And it's a volunteer role. So the province is telling us, based on what we heard tonight, is that we have to have volunteers to come up with a solution. And maybe we'll get some funding. Maybe, if it's the right solution that fits the parameters of their funding model. So it's really tricky and it's frustrating, and the years just go by and we just have Band-Aids. Seems like we only have Band-Aids. So, but I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Byer. Councillor Posichny, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair to council. I actually am supporting this one because they actually have clearly defined ask in there. And it's a no-brainer. They identified it, and it's actually a good resolution. So I am supportive of it. Maybe further to what everybody's talking about, short-term notice on funding. That's nothing new in government. And if we really want to get money in the future as a community, we have to be ready. And we have several projects in this community that in the past we were ready, and we took projects away from other communities because they weren't ready. So if you want money, you got to be ready. Not, oh, there's money, let's think of a project. It's have a project, have it on the shelf, you grab it, you submit it, you'll get money. It's just how it works. Our museum, airport pavement road, all these projects, we're Hinton was mad. They didn't have a project ready. We got 2 because we were ready. So if we want to get a project, if we want to do this, we have come up with an idea and we got to have that shovel ready. So we just take it off the shelf and so here, give us the money you have. And away we go. But I am definitely supporting this because it has clearly defined ask in there, not just we need more legislation. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Positioning to your point, that's how we got $20 million from the feds for the multi-use facility, which other municipalities were very upset about. Go ahead, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, through the mayor, with Councillor Sissy's comments, yeah, 100% agree. And this goes back to the work of the Homelessness Task Force or another organization in town. However that needs to be set up, needs to be organized and have those things in mind. And it's going to take work on our end so that when that funding announcement happens, we're ready for it. Thank you for saying that. That's important. Thank you.
All right, Council, any other questions, comments? GM Kitlitz, go ahead.
Sure, Mr. Mayor, if I could, just as to the point of being prepared, one of the things that's on our corporate plan, I'm not sure if CO Beverages talked to council about our corporate plan. I think that's coming. But one of the projects we have on there is a housing strategy, right? And that's being prepared. You develop a housing strategy that talks about housing the entire continuum from homeless. Well, it doesn't need to go to homelessness, but it's a continuum of housing. And what it does is that strategy identifies projects for us. And so we're prepared for that funding. In fact, some of the funding sources out there require that you have one in order even to apply, right? So anyway, we've thought about it. It's on our list of things to do. Where it falls on the priority list remains to be seen, but it's something we thought about. So I just wanted to share that with council.
Thank you for that, GM Kitlitz. And I think a lot of what we're talking about here today is the same thing I hear from our neighboring municipalities too. I know Jasper in particular has just hired an actual housing person. That's their primary role. But we have various priorities and we're stretched thin. All of our departments are stretched thin, and you just look at our capital plan. Where does that line up? So I'm glad to hear that administration is working on that. And to the point, again, we're dealing with a lot of nonprofits that have limited capacity. And this latest grant funding that came available was a capital component, but if you actually wanted to do the wraparound services that you need to get people out of poverty or some of these situations, you need the operational. And those dollars are not there. So it's a very complex and challenging situation. Go ahead, CO Beveridge.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to make sure that we're not misleading you to think that we're working on the housing strategy. It is on the plan. I just want to be really clear with that.
At least you're talking about it.
Absolutely we are, but yeah, thank you.
Nope, for sure. All right, council, I will call the question. All those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that council repeal the redundant policies and procedures set out in the long attachment 1? Councillor Byer.
I would like to make that motion.
Thank you. And Mr. Lucas is presenting on this. I don't think Mr. Lucas or I were even born when some of these policies came forward, so.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You're correct on that. So as noted, I'll be presenting on the repeal of redundant policies and procedures. So a little bit of context for this item. Of course, Council's 2022-2025 strategic plan includes a commitment to ensuring our bylaws and policies, our overall legislative framework, is current and reviewed on an ongoing basis. So in consultation with internal departments, we did a preliminary review of all policies and procedures with an initial focus on identifying those required for immediate repeal. This affords a clearer sense of the town's overall policy framework, allows to do this kind of cleanup and modernization, and in the future will aid in the prioritization of policies for review. But again, as noted, the current agenda item focuses only on those items recommended for an immediate repeal because the additional 39 policies and many additional procedures that have been identified for review will require more substantive kind of engagement and amendment. So I won't delve into each policy in detail, though of course council can ask questions about any. There were general categories of reasons that we are recommending repeal. The main one is redundancy, so policies and procedures often deal with matters that are adequately addressed under another authority, be this legislation such as the MGA, existing regulations, or in one case an agreement that we have. So this just again removes duplication and reduces the risk of inconsistencies. Some policies are obsolete, so they relate to practices or functions or bodies which are no longer relevant to existing operations or in fact may not be workable. In short, they no longer align with current programs and practices. And it's also noted that in this list, on occasion, approving authorities weren't actually specified in the documents. However, we want to make sure that the approving authority for policies and procedures is commensurate with their subject matter. So oftentimes procedural issues wouldn't be approved by council because council would set the higher level policy vision. Overall, there are 14 policies recommended for repeal, 4 procedures, and again, just to speak to the mayor's earlier point and highlight the importance of doing these reviews on a regular basis, the policies date from 1985 through to 2020, and the majority of them were approved in 2001 without subsequent review. So we have the motion that council repeal the policies as recommended, and with that, I'd be happy to take any questions council may have.
Thank you. And to clarify, I actually was born. So it's just a baby, but anyway. Council, any questions, comments, or concerns? Pretty straightforward. Thank you for your work on this, Mr. Lucas. With that, I will call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you, Mr. Lucas. We have no information items, no sundry items, council committee reports. We're going back to April the 19th, and we will start with Councillor Moore. Go ahead, Councillor Moore. Your mic is on.
Thank you very much. April 27th, I attended the Waste Management Authority Conference in Jasper, and I understand Constable Bear has a report on that, so I won't go on. I found it interesting, and more questions than answers for me, but we'll get those answers someday, I'm sure. April 28th, I was in the town booth at the trade fair. It's always great meeting members of the public, and yeah, it's an exciting event for sure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Moore. And we will move on to Councillor Pasichny.
Yeah, on the 24th, along with the CAO, I met with their local resident over a concern. And on yesterday, youth council meeting on May the 1st. That's my report.
Thank you, Councillor Pasichny. Councillor Bevan.
On April 19th, I attended the sod turning for the Kikanawa Lodge up in Grand Cache. The name Kikanawa has its roots in Cree, which means our home. It'll provide a facility up to 12 elders in that. The ceremony was attended by Martin Long and Honorable Minister Todd Lowen, and all our Evergreen staff was up there too, and we had over 100 people attending, so it was really good. The site they picked overlooks a little bit of a lake and the mountains, and that is very nice, and they also have room to expand if they need to be. April 21st, Councillor Chenard and I attended the Volunteer Appreciation Awards, and there were 7 awards were given out. There was 2 youth council members there. We got them involved in also giving out the awards too. We thought, they're there and they're part of our group, so they were very happy to come up and give the awards to some of the people that deserved them, and it was very well attended. On the 24th, I had the privilege of touring a potential doctor and his family around town. We took close to 3 hours. We started out at Vision Park, went all the way to Glenwood, all the way out to Wilmar Park. We done the whole town in about 2.5, 3 hours and stuff like that. They were very impressed by our facilities we had, very impressed by our hospital. Talking to them, they thought Edson would be smaller than what it was, and they were very surprised that we're not a very small community. And our hospital is top notch. Our facilities for the soccer fields, for the kids and everything else, they loved that. They liked how our streets were maintained, and that some were a little rough, but they realized we're working on it. They couldn't get over how much forest area we had in our town as we drove through the streets and that. They were very impressed that we had trees in people's yards where they come from right now in Calgary. They don't really get to know their neighbors, So they're very impressed with this, and they liked it here. So if they're gonna probably apply, but it's gonna be at least 5 months before they can get any place going on that. I talked to the HS person, she said, they are very interested in that, so, the family was very nice. They love the doctors here, they love their town, so keep our fingers crossed, we got another family moving here to help us out. And that is it.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan, and we will move on to Councillor Taylor.
On April 19th, I attended a Edson Library Board meeting. Just as a note and a follow-up to Councillor Bevan's comment, one of our vice chair, Sheila Bucko, received the Social Innovator Award at the Volunteer Appreciation Award for her amazing work towards the library renovation. She put in somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 volunteer hours in the last year. So, and still, we're not there yet, and she's still working hard to make sure it happens. So. On May 1st, yesterday, I attended the Youth Council meeting, and they're going to be presented to Council on May 16th, so I certainly don't want to spoil everything we discussed last night. And following up with that, one of their members, Maya DeLog, she received the Volunteer Appreciation Award for the Emerging Leader for her amazing work in the community. She volunteers throughout our community, even at our school. She shaved her head last year for March for a Cure, and she raised between last year and this year, somewhere in the neighborhood of $35,000 to $40,000 for the Alberta Cancer Foundation. So, so that's my report.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor, and we will move on to Councillor Byer.
Thanks. On April 20th, I had a Community Futures West Yellowhead meeting in Grand Cache. As you guys know, Lemonade Day is coming up in June, and we also, the Town of Edson grant that we approved for Community Futures to give out business loans to businesses in our community, it's expired, so that's going to have to come back to us at a later meeting. And on April 26th, I attended the West Yellowhead Community Futures Town of Edson Business Walks. It was mainly on Main Street and kind of the surrounding couple blocks. April 28th, I attended the trade show in the evening, and then backing up to April 27th, I attended the recycling and waste reduction event in Jasper with a few of our regional partners, with Councillor Moore and Mr. Kitlitz and Mr. Briscoe as well. So that was an eye-opener. We've been advocating for extended producer responsibility, EPR program in Alberta, where, so the people listening or watching can understand, is that there's supposed to be money built into things that we recycle, like bottles of ketchups and all sorts of things, that would pay for the end-of-life use, which would be recycling. So my naive understanding of what that might look like would be that if we're paying the Recycle Depot, Recycling Society, like $400,000 a year to do our recycling, then maybe they would just, give us the $400,000 and then pay them and then like slam dunk, right? Yeah, nothing like that at all. So, unfortunately, we're going to have some challenges with this, big challenges. So, most of the, they have many acronyms. The packaging and paper products that we use and other recycling will only be for single-family residential. So that means no businesses will be included in extended producer responsibility in Alberta. There's not a plan for it at all in their bylaws or legislation. The way the framework is set up, it's single-family residential. That's it. So in our circumstance where we have a depot, we need to gather much better data in order to make an informed decision on what kind of offering our community will get with the extended producer responsibility. So the timelines, I've included a few emails there that just highlighted a few key comments in some of the presentations that we may only have like a few weeks to a month to make a decision. So we need to know how much recycling our single-family residential homes bring in within the town. We need to somehow separate that information to get accurate data in order to kind of stand up for what we want to get. So it's not a slam dunk. It's complicated and it's messy, and it's going to take a lot of work for administration to kind of sift through all that, as well as some education on council's end as well. There are going to be some bylaws released after the election. So we're told that we need to pay a lot of attention to those. I suspect if they're releasing them after the election and not before, it's because they're not in our favor. And from what I've heard, we're going to have to look at that in a fine-tooth comb and look at it from a business standpoint, that what is the least that they can do with the targets that they're told to do. In other provincial jurisdictions where they have this kind of a program, if they're told to meet a 75% recycling target, that is all they meet. They never, ever exceed that. And there were other things that we had to look for with maybe contamination rates. So if a bale of plastic is only, maybe 3% contamination, that we have to look at that and realize what are our bales of plastic? Because if we exceed that 3%, we might have to pay a fine for that. So, it's not really good. And they said that will be communities that will do less recycling because of it. So it's not that great. And we need to educate ourselves. And then of course, and I said, well, hey, how do we change this? Like, if we've got this framework going, how do we move it? And they're like, oh, the framework's done. You need to start advocating to ARMA, which is the Alberta Recycling Management Authority, which is overseeing all of this, that when the bylaws are released, to advocate for a higher standard, which could probably take a few years to change. So, and good news, after 18 months, they will allow multi-residential housing to be included. So, and that is my report.
Oh, aren't you just all full of positive news? All depressed now. Just to follow up, EPR has been on the radar forever for Alberta, because we're the only jurisdiction that doesn't have it, and they put it in place, and it looks like it's going to be a freaking mess. So careful what you wish for, I guess. Anyway, I think that's something that we need to pay attention to as we're having conversations. Recycling is a big cost to our municipality. We have fairly good recycling rates, actually excellent recycling rates. So we'll have to keep a very close eye on that. So for me, on April the 26th, I was able to cut the ribbon on a brand new business in our community, Barbarito. And it was a lineup outside throughout the day and the night before, and very excited to have them in our community, and that was great to see. And then on the 29th, I attended the trade show. It was really fantastic with the youth council there and the fire department, and the kids were having a blast with the firefighting equipment, and great to engage with residents as well. Some folks taking part in the budget survey. And then last night, we had our youth council meeting, and they handed out 540 trees during the trade show, courtesy of Weyerhaeuser. So that was fantastic. They also named the mayor for the day. We won't announce the winner yet because I don't think they've been contacted. And we'll see the mayor for the day here on the 16th, yes. And Youth Council raised $500 for the food bank through their 50-50 raffle, which Councillor Moore apparently has won. So, it was really, really good. We'll look forward to Youth Council being here at our next Town Council meeting. So that is my report. We have no financial items, questions from media and public regarding items from this council meeting. Anybody have any questions? Come on up, Joanne. Just a reminder, if you have any questions, please put them through the chair, and then we'll hopefully get some answers for you.
Through the chair. I have a question about the mill rate bylaw 2293. There's two properties that have not taken it, or that there are two properties that have taken advantage of this program. What two properties would those be, and how do you apply for that exemption? Who qualifies for that?
So there's a criteria. It's on our website. Was under provincial legislation that we introduced this program, and it's a way to stimulate development. There has to be a certain percentage of assessment increase, 25%. I don't know if administration can speak to who received those certain applications, but there is a process, and it's open to everybody. So if you are gonna do an improvement to your property, if you're a non-residential property, you can apply for that exemption as long as there's over 25% assessment growth. Go ahead, GM Bittner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You can apply for that at the time when you're going through planning. It's actually one of the documents that you fill out with Mr. Kitless might correct me if I'm incorrect, but when you're going for your development permit, it's one of those documents that you fill out so that we keep that to at the end of that development, we can see, okay, it has gone up the 25%, therefore it's eligible, or unfortunately it hasn't gone up the 25%, and then it's not eligible. But you can apply for that at the time when you're applying for your project.
And it only applies to the increased assessment. It's not for the previous assessment. I don't know, GM Kitlitz, if you can speak to that any more.
No, Mr. Mayor, I don't think I have anything else to add. I think it's typically for new development too, right? Yeah.
So if you're doing a new development, could you, through the mayor, sorry, if you were doing a new development, would you know prior to developing that you were eligible for that?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, what I can share is that when new development comes to planning and development services for a new project, we make them aware of that particular program. And so whether they advance it or apply for it is up to the applicant, but we make them aware. That's an option available to.
And we're not allowed to know who the two businesses are, even though it's $48,000 of not being collected for our community?
Go ahead, CO Beveridge.
Mr. Mayor, not to FOIP. We're not able to disclose that.
All right. Once again, it is open to everybody though that would like to apply for it. So, any other questions?
Through the mayor, the conversation came up about the having a grant 2 weeks. They announce it 2 weeks before the money is available, so forth, for the homeless, particularly for the vulnerable population. When that comes through does that come through directly to the town? And the reason I'm asking is, like, would you guys, if that comes through 2 weeks, you've only got 2 weeks, it's not on the shelf. Do you guys approach Reflections or any of the other businesses in town quick to see if they might have something in a smaller, because they're a little bit smaller, less, less dealings, I guess, or whatever?
So if we're aware of a grant, we look at it, see if there's anything we can do internally. If we don't, then we pass it on to whoever we think may benefit for that. If it is something that's eligible for a nonprofit, for example, some things are just municipal grants, which we can only apply for. And there's lots of coordination with, for example, community services department with various organizations in our community. And sometimes they actually present us with grant opportunities that we're not aware of, because there's literally hundreds of different grants out there. So yeah, we always try to leverage that. Sometimes too, if it is, we know of a organization that can benefit. Food Bank's a perfect example of that. It's a town building, but they can only apply because they're the nonprofit. We will provide them with that information and support them in that grant application, because then, even though it's a town building, they are able to access those funds on behalf of the community, and it helps everybody.
That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions? Nikki from the paper, you still back there? Didn't fall asleep? No questions? Okay. All right. I do believe we have a in-camera session, closed meeting session, pursuant to sections 17, 24, and 25 of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Somebody would like to move that? Go ahead, Councillor Byer.
I can make that motion to move in camera.
Thank you. All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, so thank you very much. And can I get a motion, please, to appoint Mr. Bobek as our Director of Emergency Management? Go ahead, Councillor Bevan.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. And Councillor Chenard's not here. What are we supposed to do now? Councillor Pisichny.
I'll move adjournment.
Thank you, Councillor Pisichny. All those in favor? Motion carried.